And once again, we join Glenn Baublitz in the studio here to talk about sustainable living made easy. So what are we talking about today, Glenn?
Great American tradition, the apple.
The apple.
Apple's been around a long time, much longer than what people even know.
Okay.
For example, the first orchard that they found evidence of in Europe and West Asia was in the 13th century.
Wow.
So, they started out with the wild apples, little crab apples, that kind of thing, developed them pruned them, that kind of thing to make them bigger. And that's when it started. But harvesting of those wild apples back 10,000 years ago, because they actually found them in dwellings and areas that were inhabited back then. So that's a long time for apples.
Goodness
but
gracious.
They've developed and come a long way, of course, because crab apples started out just a little hard, knotty looking thing. But they eventually had some varieties that were a little larger. I've got a crab apple tree now, puts them out about double the size of a grape. And it's just a crab apple.
Yeah.
Deer love them.
Huh.
But in the U.S., we actually started putting in orchards of good apples in 1630.
1630.
And they said maybe a little bit earlier, a decade or two earlier, but they can definitely take it back to 1630s.
Now, we have some decent-sized orchards in our region, too.
Absolutely. Well, there was a reason for it. People were scared to drink the water. So it all started by cultivating these wild apples. And here in America, they drank the apple juice, apple ciders, because they were scared to drink the water. Now, it's not because there was some, plague going around at the time. It's just you shouldn't drink open sources of water, and they knew it made them sick.
Right.
No different than today. That's why I say, get well water and have a source of water, because people, if grade goes down, we're going to have a problem with water.
Yeah.
Those that have wells should make it okay, but you better find somebody that has a well also, because if you drink out of that stream, creek, or river, you can have a terrible case of intestinal problems.
What about all these filters, too? I've seen these little filters the size of a pencil that they say you can put 100,000 gallons through. Right.
I wouldn't trust that.
Right.
Now, there are the life filters, of course, what you're talking about, and they're okay, but they'll still let viruses through. They'll still let certain bacteria through. It has to be down to 2 microns in order to filter water that tough.
Okay.
We're getting off subject.
No,
that's important.
Yeah.
But you're right. And that's a show for another day.
Yes.
All right.
So apple cider apparently became very popular for a lot of reasons. And
in fact, it was the most popular. And everybody thinks it was beer. Well, beer was very expensive compared to apple cider.
Okay.
Because, the homestead could grow beer. They had a hard time growing the grains to create beer.
Okay.
So they could grow the apples to make apple cider, apple juice, that kind of thing.
Right.
But not everybody had the facilities, the manpower to grow hops, grow the oats, whatever they were making their beer out of.
A lot more processes and things coming into the mix.
The same way it is today. That's why nobody makes bread, because no one grows grain, because it's hard to harvest.
Yeah.
Bringing in the sheaves, the old
I
religious
remember the old song, yeah.
So it took a huge amount of people to do that. So now modern bread making is done all in the factory, and hardly anybody does it, but it's coming back. Artesian breads, that kind of thing. But back to the apples and the apple orchard and how that all got started was they started noticing if they pruned these trees, these wild apple trees, and limited the amount of fruit on each limb, the fruit became much bigger. Same principle I use in my little orchard.
Okay.
I'll have hundreds of apples on one limb. I don't want that.
Right.
Because if they all get big at the same time, it'll break the limbs right off. And they won't get big, nice, pretty apples like you want.
So you're pruning along the way.
So
sounds like
you're actually culling some of the apples. You look at the apples, and if there's like 5 in a bunch, you limit that to 2. And if there's 20 going up a limb, you take out a good third of them
Yeah.
right off the bat when they're the size of a $50. Then as they mature on, if you got one that's misshapen, you pop it off, and all of a sudden you only have them about every 6 inches apart. And all of a sudden there's these big, beautiful apples at the end of the season when they're getting ripe, and that's what you're after, is nice, pretty, sweet apples. And the tree has to be able to support that apple. I mean, the whole purpose of that apple is to put out a seed. So the better the apple, the better chances it'll make a good seed. So nature's kind of working with you on that one.
All right.
So that's how they do it. And it started producing larger apples, and they started selling these apples and making things out of them. Juicing the apple is a good way to do it. Storing it for wintertime. Some of the varieties had a very thick skin, and they found that they stored very well. So that anytime you can get any kind of food, fresh food, that can store on its own without much processing, that was a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the first time I learned that was going up to the Peaks of Otter. And I mean, the big wooden boxes that they built, and they in a cold cellar.
Right.
And these were harvested previously. I don't know how long they were sitting, but they were sitting a while.
Well, in modern orchards, they put them into cold storage in very large facilities like the Walmarts would be buying from, where they have millions of pounds in storage. Those are flooded with an argon gas, and they're also picked green. They're not
really?
even ripe.
Interesting.
Then when a store says, okay, I need apples in the middle of February, and everybody knows apples aren't ripe in
they're
February.
not.
So they would bring them out of storage, out of cold storage, because they were asleep, and they put them under fluorescent lights. Well, the chemical in that skin will turn them red, but there's no ripening actually going on. They just turn the color. That's why the modern apple has very little taste out of the store. It'd be rare to get one that has that great sweet taste.
So it never got to full development
It would
before
rot.
it was stuck in a...
Right, it would rot.
Yeah.
If you had one that was fully ripened and you tried to store it for 10 months, it would definitely rot.
Okay.
Because of the high sugar content.
Interesting.
Yep. So they do it for profit, and that's okay. I understand it.
Yeah.
But I don't have to give them my money for
Right.
unripe fruit that has very low nutrition. That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying about that.
Sure.
I don't want to poke them in the eye. They're in business to do that. Okay. I just choose to spend my money elsewhere.
Yeah.
But storing an apple, even a good farm raised apple, will store for 10 months, properly stored.
Wow.
Now, if you have refrigeration, that's one thing. But you can also store them in a spring house. That's how in the 1800s they did it.
Okay.
They also had root cellars, many more root cellars than we have today, which keep things about 55 degrees. Look, the humidity's pretty good in there, 80 to 90% because of moisture. Or just in your basement, which may stay cool. Now, you can't stick it next to your furnace and expect it to stay cool, but if you have a cool spot, they tend to do well. They also must be the best apple you can find. Don't put a bruised apple in with your other apples.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the start of decomposition, and one bad apple will spoil the whole bunch. We've heard that little saying.
Yeah,
Well, here it is.
The Osmonds made it a big hit.
Well, what happens is apples always outgas a gas that will cause to go to the next apple.
Okay.
And if they get any kind of molds, everybody knows the mold spreads. That outgassing also will cause other fruits, your other vegetables, to go bad. It causes them to ripen super fast. Put an apple in with a bag of bananas, and that bananas will ripen it just immediately.
Wow.
How about that?
An apple.
An apple. So you must store your apples separate. They also would store them in barrels.
Okay.
And bury that barrel in the ground on the side of a hill.
Right.
And cover them with leaves or whatever to give them a covering, and then go during the wintertime and dig them out.
How about that?
That's
Okay.
another method. You can do the same thing.
Just one more quick question about apples here. Well, I'll probably have another one later, but this one is, I've heard if you cut an apple open in a room, that it helps with the smell of the room and that kind of thing. Have you heard that?
No, I have not.
Yeah. You literally cut it in half and then just let it lay open, and it helps absorb some of the whatever smells and things like that in the room.
Yeah, there has to be something in that outgassing that ionizes the smell
or something. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. That would make sense. Yeah.
That's new fact.
I'm gonna
on you.
I'm
You
gonna have to
gotta
look
check
that one up.
out.
I'm gonna look that one up.
So if you have apples and you want to store them,
Mm-hmm.
they should definitely be separated. Now, if you look at the ones coming in from your local grocery store, they come in a real nice box, and there's a tray in between each layer, and that's so those apples don't touch one another. They can circulate the air around them. The older in the 1800s and all the way up to about the 60s, people would store them in barrels layered with straw, and that kept them separated.
Okay.
Some people would take them and wrap them in newspaper. Anything to keep them from touching one another and causing bruising. Now, there's a quick way to find if you have problems in your storage.
Mm-hmm.
It's that smell of a rotting apple. Everybody kind of knows it starts to get that cider smell. You need to pull them out immediately. Now, if that box has several bad apples in it, go ahead and juice those apples because the spores have gotten all over that box.
Okay. All right.
And you just juice them or you can them or whatever you want to do and get them out. They're not going to be that good for eating fresh, and they're not going to continue to keep. So
Okay.
just a little tidbit on storage.
Can I jump in here? Because I
Sure.
looked it up while you were talking there. Apples are commonly used in cars and instrument cases to naturally eliminate odors without the use of any chemicals or equipment. Simply cut and slice an apple in half or in quarters.
I'll
And
be
within
damned.
24 to 48 hours, it helps absorb the smells. Isn't that something?
Nature got it together before we did.
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
it?
that's right.
Like I said, you could take these apples that maybe are getting near the end of their storage life,
Mm-hmm.
and you just go ahead and make the cider. So that's one thing you can do with them. That was considered the drink of the colony.
Yeah.
It was much cheaper than beer,
Mm-hmm.
so every man out there could afford that if you had
Right.
an apple tree or a neighbor had an apple tree. That because they were scared to death to drink the water.
Mhm.
Same as today, you shouldn't be drinking open source water. It was a cheaper way to or safer way to have open source of liquid, which it had a lot of water in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it had a good taste. You
Yeah.
know, sometimes water gets kind of boring. You know, if you're trying to clean your body out and you drink nothing but water for about 2 weeks, you go, I really want something other than
Yeah, I
water.
want something with some taste. And I mean, I love apple juice and apple cider.
So the apple cider would get a little tangy,
Mm-hmm.
and what's happening there? It's converting itself into alcohol,
Right.
and that's where Applejack came from.
Okay.
Everybody thinks Applejack is just hard cider. It's
Mhm.
actually not.
Okay.
Applejack is actually a concentrated alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And how would they do that? You know, they didn't have stills and stuff, so
Right.
they would let it freeze.
Huh.
Water freezes before the alcohol,
Okay.
so they would skim off the ice. And every time they did that, the alcohol content was much higher.
Yeah.
The volume decreased, but
Sure.
it got much more potent.
Interesting.
And they could get it up to 80 proof.
Wow.
Whoa!
Wow.
That's how I guess the Jack come in, because they got jacked up off that stuff.
Wow.
But that's what they did, and that was a real popular drink, you know, on a Saturday night. I feel sure, especially if Granny got a hold of it.
Well, yeah.
But if you let that alcohol continue to ferment,
Right.
and there's a natural yeast on it to cause this natural fermentation, but it goes from juice to cider to alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
then to vinegar. It becomes
Ah.
acidic,
Okay.
and that's when you'll taste it in your hard apple cider.
Right.
And go, wow, that tastes just like vinegar. That's because that's what it is.
Yeah.
And the same principle applies. You can concentrate that vinegar by freezing some. Now, it's a little harder because vinegar is so close to the concentration of water as far as density or
Yeah.
specific gravity. But you can still concentrate it some. You would have to control the freezing to concentrate it. If you want to have vinegar for pickling,
Mm-hmm.
for canning, those kind of things, it needs to be 5%.
Yeah, and you told us recently on one of the other
yes,
shows that it's been knocked down to 3.
They've diluted it down to
Right.
3 to 4,
Yeah.
and that's not safe.
Right.
So getting these concentrated vinegars is what you have. Make sure if you're going to buy that vinegar that you're buying 5%.
And it should stay clearly on it what it is, right?
Clearly on
Okay.
it. And you'll notice it's just not as strong.
Mm-hmm.
Apple cider vinegar's gotten really expensive. You noticed that?
Well, and one of the reasons why is because there's a lot of naturalists out there that say it's good for the cholesterol. The apple cider vinegar with mother
Yeah.
has become real popular.
Probiotics, correct.
So a lot of people are buying it for that reason.
If you want to make the vinegar,
Mm-hmm.
the natural yeast will over time build up and create the vinegar, create the alcohol, then the vinegar. But if you add one of those mothers into it, it's already a super concentration of that specific bacteria, and it'll speed that process up quite a bit.
So, okay, now you got me going. What's the mother? Is that the stringy looking stuff inside?
It's a bacteria that gets concentrated,
Right.
And
Sort of rises to the top or
yes,
whatever?
well, it's more like the spores of a mushroom.
Oh, okay.
So it's lived its life. It's used up all the sugar,
Right.
and it can't grow anymore.
Right.
So it puts out, for lack of a better term, a spore.
Right.
And that spore settle to the bottom along with the little dead bodies.
Yeah, yeah.
And there they sit and waiting for more sugar. Now, if you
Okay.
want to revive them, adding sugar. Well, when you put it in apple juice, which it does have sugar in it, they pop back to life. They take right back
Interesting.
off.
How about that?
Once again, nature's got it together. So we talked about concentrating that applejack and making your vinegars and that kind of thing. We talked about storing and baking apples and juice apples. What are the varieties to be looking for? If you want a storing apple, you just want apples to eat, to store over the winter so you have something fresh or to make at a later time. Go for the Red Delicious. Everybody knows what a Red Delicious look like.
Okay.
The Granny Smiths, which is an old-time favorite apple, and it's
Right.
green.
Okay.
It's a little tart, but it does have a sugar content, so don't be scared that it's going to be a sour mix. The modern varieties would be the Galas. Now,
Okay.
I like a Gala because it lasts a long time. You can store a Gala a long time.
Okay.
It's not a huge apple, but it's a good eating apple. It's high sugar content.
Right.
And the thing of it is they store really well. And the Fuji, which come out of Japan, which is very close between a Pink Lady and a Gala, and what's the other? Honeycrisp. All those are pretty much modern variations of old-timey apples.
Interesting. Okay.
But they've done them for a market. They're pretty apples. Some of them are a little stripy, and it's a very good apple. So if you want to buy them or buy some trees to have your own orchard, if you're after storing apples, those are the ones. Now, a lot of these have dual purposes, and we'll read them off. For a baking apple, a good crisp storing apple is also very good for baking because they hold their firmness. They're not mealy.
Right.
So all the ones I just read, plus a couple others. One is the wine sap. That's a very old variety. A lot of the orchards grow them around here. They're very disease resistant.
Okay.
And the Honeycrisp. That's probably the most favored at the grocery store. Everybody's looking for Honeycrisp
Right.
or the Galas. For a juice apple, the Honeycrisp is very good. The wine sap is very good. And Red Delicious to a point because it has a lot of juice, very large apple. But the Golden Delicious is very sweet, and it makes a super duper cider
Yeah.
because of its sweetness. And that attributes to how much alcohol it can produce.
Okay.
Kind of like grapes.
Right.
You harvest your grapes, you get some juice from them. You test that juice, and with the hydrometer, if you're going to make a little wine, and you go, okay, I could get 8 to 9% alcohol out of natural grapes.
Okay.
So if you want 12%, you're going to have to add sugar. Most commercial wines are at 12%.
Okay.
So that's a good apple because of its high sugar content. And the Pink Lady, that's a newer variety, fairly inexpensive to buy. If you're going to buy a tree and you want good juice apples, that would be a good one to get.
Okay.
So just a few varieties. Now, there is a buttload of varieties out there that you can get that are being developed, have been developed, and old-timey ones. Some people like the Arkansas Black for storing, but it has a really thick skin.
Okay.
And that's why they store so good, but they have a little odd shape to them. And it's an older variety that you don't see as much.
So those apples
anymore.
aren't from around here.
Yeah, they're from Arkansas.
Let's take a break here, Glenn.
Sure.
And before are you done with the different styles
Yeah,
of apple?
yep,
Okay,
I'm ready.
I want to make sure we had a good finishing that list. And when we come back, where are we going to go when we come back?
We'll talk about some other uses of the apples.
Okay.
And we'll get into that. And this is where it's probably going to happen this Saturday. We usually get together on one weekend in the fall and do a kind of miniature apple festival at the house.
Nice.
So my little inner circle's coming over to do apples.
All right. Well, that sounds good. We're with Glenn Ballblitz. You're listening to Sustainable Living. We'll be back in just a moment. Let me put a little striker here. Where are you, little guy? We're back with Glenn Ballblitz. We had just gone through a complete list of different types of apples. Didn't know about the Black Arkansas one until now. And so learning along with you. If you have a question for Glenn, you can always contact him through our text line, 434-248-0704, or go to Facebook and type in Sustainable Living Made Easy, and you'll be able to tell right away that it's Glenn over there.
That's
because
right.
There's a big, pretty picture of a picture of an apple, I think, or something. I don't know.
Some of the other uses for all these apples we're talking about is just canning the juice. I mean, you would have to have a way to smash the apple or crush the apple or shred the apple and then squeeze that juice out. Well, it was called an apple press. It had a crusher on one end of it. All the crushed apples fell down into this wooden basket. You slid the basket to the back, and it was a screw-type press. I've got one. It's a little over 100 years old.
Wow.
Still cranking.
Sure.
We used it last year. I'm going to use it this year. So you could actually can that juice.
Okay.
And you don't have to pressure can apple juice. It has a high enough acid content that all you got to do is water bath it. So that's a good thing.
Okay.
Really good source of nutrition. Middle of winter, you could break that out, and if you let it sit open, you'll have apple cider too.
Yeah.
So there's a couple options for that. Just canning apples, and again, all you have to do is water bath them. You can cut them up any way you want, cube them, add a little cinnamon, make pie fillings, and we're going to do that also.
Okay.
So you do have to cook them a little first if you're going to can them, and the reason for that is apples have a lot of air in them. So you can them a little bit, it expands the air, and the little bubbles come out.
Okay.
That's why you get that frosty on top to loosen the air. If you don't do that, the apples float to the top and get into the oxygen in that half-inch gap of your jar. You don't want that.
Okay.
So cook them a little first. That gets rid of the air, and they'll stay a good,
Interesting.
clear mixture for you. Yeah.
Okay.
And you can throw any spice in you want. A lot of people use cinnamon, nutmeg, that kind of thing.
Right.
So that's what you want. Applesauce. I mean, that's a no-brainer. You quarter your apples. You cook them a little bit till they're soft. You mash them up. Some people run them through a squeeze-o, if you know what that is. And you end up with just an apple sauce, minus the skins. From that is where the apple butter comes from. And it's a long process, peeling the apples and coring them out, quartering them up, cooking them down. By the end of the day, you go, okay, I got applesauce. I'm not going to stay another 10 hours and make apple butter. So you just refrigerate it, and next day or the next weekend, you just pop it out and you start making apple butter. And you get a big kettle. In fact, I just got a new copper kettle. Not a new copper kettle. In fact, it's 100 years old, but friends of ours, Pennsylvania, come up with it, and I went up and got it. So that was the tradition. Copper kettle keeps you from getting rust, that metal taste from a steel pot, and it keeps a good clean taste to it. So the apple butter takes about 10 hours to do, because what you're doing is caramelizing sugar and evaporating water. So you end up with this nice thick applesauce that actually is going to turn brown on you.
Okay.
But the taste has changed because it's caramelized the sugar. Now, some people add cinnamons, and there's a group over in Giles County that puts them red hot candies in it.
Oh,
about
really?
the little sweetheart candy?
Yeah,
Because it's nothing but sugar
sure.
and cinnamon, but it has its own specific taste, and it makes the apple butter a little redder.
Yeah.
Not my favorite. It's not very traditional for me, and I'm going, gosh, this doesn't taste like nothing like Mom's. But you can flavor it to however you want. But the apple butter process is a continuous all-day work, and you better have at least 4 to 5 people, because you have to stir
Oh, really?
constantly for 10 hours.
Oh my gosh!
It's about a 10.
Wow.
Well, that's because I'm doing it 20 gallons at a time.
Okay, yeah.
But they have this giant paddle, and you stir it all day long, and and every kid that comes along, you make him do 10 minutes.
Yeah,
After
exactly.
about 10 minutes, you go, wow, I need a break.
You stretch it out, sure.
Right. Speaking of the vinegar part, which all the cores, apple peels, all that kind of stuff, everybody would either feed them to pigs or the chickens or whatever, but you can actually make vinegar from that.
Oh, really? Wow.
So rather than losing, 50 pounds out of, several bushel of apples, you could use the cores, because you're just after the juice that's in it anyway. Kind of like wine, you start out with just whole grapes. You mash them a little bit to just release some of the juice. You put it all in a bucket. That musk, after it's done, you drain the juice off and throw all the pulp and stuff away, because you don't want all that pulp in your wine.
Right.
Well, this is the same principle. You just have peelings. There's nothing wrong with them. There's nothing wrong with the core. It's all still good, healthy apple parts. And the alcohol will come from that. Then you'll drain that off, and you'll end up with really hard cider, which will go to alcohol, which then will go to vinegar. So rather than throw that away, it's a way to recycle that.
Okay.
And you can still feed it to the pigs afterwards. Feed it to them at the alcohol stage if you want. Pigs would be happy. Puts weight on them, Well, they feed brewers grains to hogs. You just can't feed a bunch of it at one time. But all that, we're talking about resources and making sure your resources are used to the best of your ability. Well, this is one way to do it.
Right.
If you're going to make the vinegar, it's pretty easy. It's nothing but a little bit of sugar to speed things up, and you would put it in a jar with your apple peelings and all that kind of stuff, and put a little bit of water in it so it covers the peelings, and put a filter cloth over it. Now, that filter cloth can be as simple as a coffee filter. Now, what that does is keep the bugs and stuff out, because fruit flies are going to come visit you if you don't. and you don't want those getting in because they will contaminate the batch.
Okay.
But the natural yeast and bacteria can still pass through a coffee filter
Okay.
and populate your batch.
Okay.
Or you can throw in an existing mother, as we talked about a little while ago, right? So that's how you do it. And it takes about 2 months of this thing to be percolating. Now, you don't want to put a tight lid on it because it's going to outgas. It's going to create CO2 from the alcohol production.
Otherwise, you might be growing a Molotov cocktail inside.
Yeah, and if you put that in your basement and it explodes, your wife will be highly upset.
It'll explode, of course, in the middle of the night when you're in a deep sleep, too.
Yeah, and you'll think the world's ended. But adding that previous mother will speed things up. We talked about that a little while ago.
Yeah.
And your target's going to be that 5%. Now, in order to know whether your juice can produce that 5%, you're going to have a hydrometer.
Okay.
That's your starting point. And you just take some of that juice, use your hydrometer, and it'll say it has the potential to make 5% alcohol. Well, if it'll make 5% alcohol, it's going to make 5% vinegar. It's almost a perfect 1-to-1.
Okay.
But once it's made vinegar, how to check it? Now, that's a little more scientific, and it's called tartaration. Tartaration. And it's like doing a chemical test for your pool.
Okay.
You could test it with a little pH strip, but that is not accurate enough because the pH strips will not go down low enough to get a 5% concentration.
Okay.
So they also have electronic ones, but if you want to spend about $900 for making $2 vinegar, I wouldn't recommend that either. But you could look it up, read about it, and see how to test your vinegar.
Okay.
It's called tartaration. It just uses a very simple, it's called a base or an alkaline base to test it, and that's how you do it.
Okay.
But read about it. It's pretty interesting, but it's a lot longer than we have time for. All right, for the homesteader here, we've talked about apples and how important they are and how important they were, and they're probably going to be important again. If you don't have apples, I've noticed this one thing. There's a lot of people that have apple trees, and nobody's pruning them. A, they don't know how. B, it's a lot of work.
Right.
C, you got to do it every year. Twice a year if you want really good apples. So that's what keeps me busy in the summer and early spring, just before the buds break out into them. So it is work to it, but it's a great source of fruit that you can grow in Virginia. I mean, there's not a whole lot of fruits we can grow in Virginia of any quantity, but apple trees are one of them. So if you've got a neighbor that's got these apple trees, and you can help him prune those, or even learn how to prune it yourself and help him prune it then, because he may not know how.
Okay.
I've seen so many apple trees here just in Bedford County and Campbell County that are just not been pruned. And I'm going, wow, that's a really nice tree, but it's getting out of hand in a hurry.
Right.
Then you got the 50-foot tall tree. What do you do with that? It can be pruned also. A lot of the orchards, when their trees get too big to pick, they will whack off a heck of a limb.
Oh, wow.
And do this thing called bud shielding, and they will put a small bud from one of the limbs in the side of that bark. Now, that tree is going to heal over.
Right.
And if you put that bud shield, a bud from one of the limbs, it'll start a new limb right there.
How about
back
that?
down low where you want to be for picking.
Right.
If you've noticed, these orchards don't have 50-foot tall trees. Who
Right.
the heck wants to get up 50 foot?
No. Right.
So just because the tree is overgrown does not mean it can't be brought back.
Interesting.
So that probably is a class I ought to do for this community.
Yeah.
Just bring them out to my place and have them prune some trees for me. Is that sneaky or what?
Well, hey, they're getting something, you're getting something.
Well, the thing of it is, I know how I am. They're going to go, could you come and help me do my first one? Dang, it didn't work as good as I'd hoped.
Right, exactly.
All right, so if you want good fruit, it's going to cost you time and labor.
Right.
You're going to have to figure out how to prune these things and how to care for these trees and how to fertilize these trees and what they need. Same way with the peach trees, too. It's all about pruning and care. the but to have someone come in and actually prune a tree professionally that does it for a business.
Right.
Now these orchards pay immigrants to come in and do
Sure.
them, and believe it or not, some of them guys get paid very well because they have a highly needed skill,
Right.
and they're not paid $10 an hour. Don't you think that's the way it is?
Right.
It's not. Same with grapes. I have an aunt in New York who her entire living was made on pruning grapes and showing people how to prune grapes
Wow.
for, I think it was Taylor Wines.
Huh.
And she did that for 35 years, and she had a six-figure salary.
Wow. Who'd have thunk that?
But, some of them grapevines up there were 6 inches thick and 75 years old. That you can't afford an idiot to go through
No.
your vineyard
Yeah, they're
and
ruining it.
start whacking off the fruiting parts of your vineyard. Same way with an apple tree. People get to whacking out limbs because they go, I don't need this one. It doesn't fit my shape. Well,
Right.
if that's your fruiting limb, you just knocked yourself back 3 years.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
So there's a little more to it. Let's say you got a tree you've planted 2 years ago. You bought at Lowe's or a local landscape place, new little fruit tree, apple tree, and it's grown for year or two, maybe 3. Well, now this thing's 8 to 10 feet tall and starting to look a little straggly and doesn't have a good shape to it. And so you hire a guy like me or an arborist or a fruit tree pruner to come in. It'll be about $20. That's it. Just because he can
Really?
do it
Wow.
in 10 minutes
Sure.
and then clean up the brush. That's no big deal. And what he's pruning for in the early years is the structure of the tree. So the tree will be strong when it gets to be 5, 7 years old. It has the limbs growing into proper angle. The fruit is not going to break them off.
Right.
If they're at very steep angles, it'll break a limb right off.
Right.
So there's a little more skill to it than just whacking on a tree. So let's say you got a tree that's now 5 years old, never been pruned. It's up there 15, 20 foot, and it doesn't take them long to do that. Some fruit trees will, especially apple, will grow 3 to 4 feet in 1 year.
Wow.
With all these little new shoots.
Yeah.
That's going to cost you a little bit.
Right.
It'd be about $50 to $100 to have that kind of tree pruned. Now, if you've got one that is 5 years and been poorly pruned, and this is what happens when you prune a tree,
Yeah.
it puts out 3 more branches. So you go, this is kind of self-defeating here. I cut one and get back 3. Well, it's just the way the tree works. It starts to make itself more compact, tries to
Right.
put out new limbs. I've lost a limb. I want to add 2 because it is going to cut it again next year. So that's what happens. So if you got a tree that's about 5 years old, poorly pruned, still about 15 to 20 feet high, that's about $100 to $200 to have that tree properly pruned.
Wow.
And you're going to have to do that probably 3 years in a row
Wow.
because it's not producing any fruit.
Sure.
It's doing all vegetation, and that's not what the tree is for. The
Right.
tree is for fruit.
Right.
So you have to know how to cut out the unproductive stuff, leave the productive stuff, and cause the tree to start putting out apple blossoms. And now there's a definite technique to it, and the tree knows what to do.
Right.
You just have to help it.
Right.
Then every year you have to do this, but it's easier on your 3rd year.
Okay.
Now you have a tree that's 5 years old. It's been pruned 3 times, so now it's an 8-year-old tree, and that thing ought to be putting out beautiful apples by now. If not, something's wrong.
Okay.
But that's where mine are at this stage. Mine are probably 8 to 10 feet high. They have a good open forum in the center where they can get lots of air, lots of light, and they're starting to put out lots of flowering buds. Now I have to start pulling apples off, which kind of breaks my heart.
Sure.
I've been waiting 5 to 7 years
Right.
to get this thing to put out apples. Now I'm pulling them off, but I'm getting apples that weigh a pound apiece. That's what we're after, folks.
Sure.
So that's pretty much all we had today.
Okay.
So if you want to, you're going to have to do a little reading about growing apples if that's what you decide to do. If you want to just buy apples, and you can from your local orchard or your local neighbor's got a lot of them. There's a lot of things you can do with the American apple.
Yeah.
Keeps the tradition going.
Yeah. Well, Glenn, thank you as always. If people have questions about apples or any of the topics that we've covered here in the past, or a topic they may want you to cover, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Right on Facebook. Just drop me a line and ask me a question, and I'll get back to you just as quick as possible.
Okay. And if you're not into the Facebook thing, you can text us. Most people have a phone that has the ability to text 434-248-0704. That's 434-248-0704. We will pass that message on to Glenn. Thank you, sir, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.